I've heard people say we need to unite, we need to come together. It is a trope that's branded about pretty often, and it is the case that a lot of time the people saying that aren't psychologically prepared to actually achieve that, or don't have the energy or the will. This is a video that's kind of talking about that. I've mentioned that a few times to anybody that I think's able to listen. I'm just going to point my camera at the video and let this guy explain it better than I can.
There are four separate factions on the right, which I will break down as the snake, the lobster, the frog, and the cross. With the snake, that's libertarians and business conservatives. And they're a very big faction. However, they don't have a shared unifying ideology that will make their young men willing to fight and die for them very strongly. So they'll just become part of another coalition. With the lobster, that's Jordan Peterson and his centrist Christianity, which is much more palatable for a secular audience. And either you will see a more centrist Christianity develop, or you will see a more far-right Christianity. If it manifests with centrist leadership, it will be under an ideology that was invented by Jordan Peterson, even if he might not be the ultimate leading figure, or it'll be someone who comes after Jordan Peterson. Then you have the red pill, which is like 4chan and Andrew Tate, and will have a tremendous amount of supporters due to sexually frustrated young men. However, it's too cynical to actually form an ideology around, and so it'll be part of the...
What he's calling the red pill, I'd say is the black pill, the apathetic, the people that think that everything's too far gone to fix.
ruling coalition, but not its leader. Then you have the hard Christian right, which I
picked up Noah Yuval Harari's book one time, and in the middle page it says the biggest enemy of the globalists is going to be the fundamentalists.
The coalition as the Petersonians, and fundamentally it will be a battle between fundamentalists and the Petersonians for the right. I'm going to make a best and worst case scenario here, both of which I think are plausible, and then through discovering these two separate trajectories, we can try to figure out what the right can do in order to not completely dishonor itself. In most religions in world history, the dominant principle and thing humans can use to bring out goodness against the chaos of the world is conscious thought. Because without conscious thought, we're slave to our emotions and passions, but with it, we can plan around them and then be able to form some kind of order. And the worst position for the right would be it just naturally forming raw chaos without a coherent single ideology and just acting in a vindictive way against everyone it feels wrong against, because if it has a coherent ideology, it can actually hold itself to a moral standard. I mean, an example of this going wrong is the Nazis. The Nazis had no moral standards for themselves and just behaved in the worst way possible out of a feeling of disgust and revenge. There are two things I find worrying. The first is the right's anti-intellectual culture, which makes the rise of a coherent theory of the world the right could use to find moral standards seem not that great. And also, in the previous precedents for conflicts like civil wars, it's normally the most radical faction that wins. And so from that, you would see a highly ethnocentric, aggressive, religious, fanatical faction. You need to have a balance of faith and reason, where faith pushes your soul and gives you the inspiration in the generally good direction, while reason can balance it and temper it with the real outside world. And I worry that a religious fanatical right would lose all reason, because fanatics often win civil wars because they have the highest amount of in-group loyalty, but also they're just not good at understanding how the world really works. Loyalty. And I worry that if fanatics seize control of America, they might hurt genuine religion through making it look corrupt and decadent. And you see this with the Ayatollahs in Iran, you see it with Franco in Spain, the Argentinian and Chilean. It's a pretty common pattern in which religious fanatics seize political power, make the religion itself look corrupt, and then end up making the society far more secular. You need to temper faith with rationality because that's the only way to keep it real and stay reasonable. Faith can nourish your soul, but at the same time, you need to have rational feedback with the rest of the world. America, even if it becomes a Christian-run nation, still has lots of atheists and agnostics, and you need their buy-in into the system. A couple of videos ago, I had a video comparing the often insane similarities between Rome and America. And if we're looking at that whole comparison, we would be entering the Augustan age pretty soon. And that was when Roman religious conservatives seized control of the society and tried to shove socially conservative legislation, especially aimed at raising the birth rate, down the population's throat. But it was just not effective because the population was so secularized that it couldn't go back. The Swiss psychologist and philosopher Carl Jung talked of the Odin switch, or how in Germanic peoples they're normally very law-abiding and orderly, but when they really get pushed, they can go full psycho and return to barbarism. And you saw this with the Nazis, where the Germans are normally a very orderly people, and then they just went full barbarian. And I worry the same thing with the modern American right, where America is still a heavily culturally and genetically Germanic country, so that instinct is still there. And with the left, they act like a woman who is badgering her husband to make her husband retaliate. And the right does not work in increment like the left. It takes a giant switch. And so I'm worried at a point where the right just goes full barbaric to take revenge against the decades of humiliations by the left. In fact, the only way the left could possibly win the culture wars is because the right has such a quick jump from being passive to being extremely aggressive, and the left, meanwhile, gradually builds up towards more and more aggression, would be for the left to goad the right into a direct rebellion, thus forcing the army, which normally tilts right, but will follow the government and follow orders, to crush the right-wing rebels, thus painting the right as traitors. And we all like to forget this happened on the right, but we have to remember January 6th happened. And January 6th happened before whatever recession and other political problems are going to happen over the next couple of years. So if that's the baseline, what could happen next? And I'm worried about some ridiculously retarded actions on the right, like that, or launching rebellions that will make the right seem terrifying and radical to normal American people. Well, the reality is the right just needs to stay still, keep its values, and then the left in the Leviathan will gradually decompose, thus leaving a more moderate right in power. So the right needs to hold on to its feelings. And I would just say, for the love of God, people listening on the right, do not launch a rebellion. Also, the left is much better at branding. So if the right does something radical, the left will immediately shame the right for it, and the right will face greater consequences for doing something insane than the left will, because the left is much more smooth at delivery, while the things the right does are likely to come across as cringe. Conspiracy theories are in some ways the ultimate point of faith over reason, and that you're not following basic logic, but instead you're saying my worldview must be correct, so I'll have all these bizarre inconsistencies to build up a worldview that aligns with what I believe to be true with my faith. And you know your movement is not doing the right thing when you have conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories allow you to just totally ignore the truth. And once you're ignoring the truth, it cuts yourself off from any stabilizing foundation. You're already seeing the right push conspiracy theories in a really big way, where, just as an example, President Trump and Fox News were pushing the conspiracy theory that the election was faked, which had no evidence. I mean, the right has Congress people like Paul Gosar or Marjorie Taylor Greene that push legitimate conspiracy theories and said January 6th and the rebellion was good. And on top of that, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, have relationships with literal white supremacists